And that really explains, I believe, the Republican hyperventilating about Obama's a socialist. Obama's not a socialist, but the Republicans are like in hysterics about any little thing that's going on because their way of thinking is being trumped. So the ideas of socialism, even the fact that that they tried to label Obama a socialist during the campaign, and then he won, I think is an amazing testament to what's going on. The ideas of socialism are being raised. And I really think that probably those 20% or even 30% who said they favor socialism, I would imagine that what they really are imagining is something like Holland. That's probably what people are thinking. That would be better. That's socialism? Yes. Check. The fact that that is not socialism, I think, though, is worthy of discussion. What exactly socialism is worthy of discussion. And so I want to say three things. I want to talk about what Marx had to say, what the founders of the socialist movement had to say about capitalism, how they identified capitalism's dynamics and its flaws. Secondly, I want to say something about what socialism is. I've already hinted a little bit about what we're saying it is not, but I want to say more about what it actually is. And then thirdly, something about what we in the ISO, we or people who fancy ourselves as socialist organizers would propose that we do if you're for socialism. So first, capitalism. Marx argued that capitalism was the most revolutionary system the world had ever seen. It was the most radical system. It was a system, in his words, the bourgeoisie, the French for the capitalists, cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production, and thereby the relations of production, and with them the whole relations of society. All fixed, fast, frozen relations with their train of ancient and venerable prejudices and opinions are swept away. All that is solid melts into air. All that is holy is profane. It's a world of constant disturbance. Whereas previous societies lived by keeping everything the same, capitalism lives by constantly changing everything. You buy the iPhone and the next thing you know, it's outdated. You have to get the 3G. The bourgeoisie, Marx argued, also produced something that changed the world in another important way. It's not just that they have this dynamic competitive system, and by the way, it's that competition between the different capitalist interests that drives the system to be so productive. That's part of its dynamism, is that competition to the death. But Marx argued that, look, that productive system, gathering people to work together in large numbers as wage laborers, which was brand new in world history, that productive system had, in a relatively short period of time, produced wealth that just far surpassed anything that previous societies had seen. During its scarce rule of just 100 years, by the time Marx is writing, has created more massive and more colossal productive forces than all preceding generations together. Subjection of nature's forces to man, machinery, application of chemistry to industry and agriculture, and you just go on and on. The conjuring of whole populations out of the ground. What earlier century had even a presentiment that such productive forces slumbered in the lap of social labor? And in a way, you could say, it sounds like Marx is almost praising capitalism. He's marveling at its wonders and its productive capacity, at its innovation. Marx is marveling at these things. So what's the problem? What's the catch? Well, Marx argued that there's a flaw to this system, I don't want to say a policy flaw or a personality flaw, nothing that's superficial. Marx argues a fairly central flaw, bless you, a fairly central flaw to the system, and that is that all of that relentless productive energy is actually unplanned. That is, no one is really in control of it. It's a competitive system that nobody organizes. It's not controlled by anyone. It feels to even the biggest competitor as an external coercion on them. Bill Gates is not the master of the system. The system, he has competitors constantly breathing down his neck, and so he feels the laws of capitalism as a kind of external coercion on him. It's a system that no humans, it's a system humans created, but a system that no humans actually control, strangely. Marx has this wonderful kind of poetic way of putting it. He says it's like a magician, or a sorcerer, if you will. Here's how he said it. Modern bourgeois society has conjured up such gigantic means of production and of exchange, is like the sorcerer who is no longer able to control the powers of the netherworld, whom he has called up by his spells. AIG has conjured up such gigantic means of production and really of exchange, credit default swaps, subprime collateralized debt up, they've conjured up to such an enormous degree that they are no longer able to control those demons that they've conjured up. And they threaten to destroy AIG. They threaten to destroy all of the banks themselves. That is, that Marx knew about AIG, it seems. Probably had different initials in German. There once was a time when people starved on this planet. People would starve all the time. That was a thing. You could read about it in history. People would starve. There were famines. There was things would happen to the crops, you see, and people would starve. There would be a flood. There would be a drought. There would be some kind of pestilence. Something would occur, and there was not enough food. And then people would starve. And Marx observed that there is a curious situation, a new situation that arises uniquely under capitalism. That is that now we have a situation where people go without. People starve in a circumstance of extreme abundance. And in fact, it's because of that abundance that people starve. Try to get your head around that for a second. He says, in these crises, there breaks out, he's talking about the periodic capitalist crises, there breaks out an epidemic that in all earlier epochs would have seemed an absurdity. The epidemic of overproduction. Society suddenly finds itself put back into a state of momentary barbarism. It appears as if a famine, a universal war of devastation, had cut off the supply of every means of subsistence. Industry and commerce seem to be destroyed. And why? Because there's too much civilization, too much means of subsistence, too much industry, too much commerce. And to what do we owe the honor of our current economic malaise? Too many houses, too many subprime mortgages, not too many houses to house people, not too many houses for the homeless, but too many houses to sell on the market, the proliferation of too many subprime mortgages for the industry to become profitable. And so there's a glut and now a crisis. I was reading an article, Tim Geithner writes in today's New York Times that, the situation that Obama faced was the recession, the damaged financial system, credit had dried up, forcing businesses to lay off workers and defer investments. People were finding it difficult to borrow and pay for college, blah, 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 blah. And so their main thing was they have to restore the banks, you see. You have to restore. I think Tim Geithner's got it all wrong. I think really it's not just a question of the banks, it's a question of the productive capacities of the system itself. The New York Times column, Clyde Haberman, I think was his name, did a investigation. He said, I wanted to go out and find out what was really going on in this economy. And he went to like Avis Rent-A-Car. He said, hey, so, it's really the banks, right? You guys are having a hard time getting a loan. You can't get credit. They're like, no, we can get credit. We just got too many cars. We got lots and lots and lots and lots of cars. We have too much inventory, and we have to get rid of it somehow. The system produces. That's a consequence of unplanned production, competitive production for profit. Is that everybody inevitably produces way too much, not for need, but for the market, for what the market can bear. And so what must occur to right the system, or to put it back to rights on its terms, is a universal war of devastation. That's what we're living through. We're living through a universal war of devastation. By the way, I just found out yesterday that I'm likely to be what we call in New York City excessed from my school due to budget cuts. Do they need less teachers in Harlem? I teach in Harlem. The kids need fewer teachers. We just have too many teachers, No, everybody must be late. I think we lost 4 million jobs in the past 4 months. An enormous universal war of devastation that we are living through right now in order for the market to clear out itself and begin again. This is the epidemic that seems to be an absurdity for us. I'm sure people have seen, speaking of the homeless, people have seen the tent cities that are growing up. Places like California, people living in tents who work. People going to work every day from their tent and then coming back, as if we didn't have enough houses. Actually, we have plenty of houses. We could house everybody. That would be quite easily done. Problem is, not everybody can afford to pay, and so the market cannot bear. Anyway, you understand what I'm saying. We could talk about it more. And so Marx argued that the system has a fundamental flaw built into it, and that capitalism in that way is doomed never to really produce for human need. It always produces for profit. It always goes into a crisis, and it always seeks to make us pay for these crises with the devastation that they must do to get the market back to zero. Well, if that's capitalism, then what is socialism? What's to replace that? What's a better way of organizing things?